Well, today's topic, The Blue Butterfly, is a behind-the-scenes look at the opulent private life of silent film star Marion Davies and her 34-year-old relationship with William Randolph Hearst, including all kinds of Hollywood craziness that we're going to hear about. It is our speaker's second book that came out just this past May. Leslie Johansen Nack, her debut book, 14, A Daughter's Memoir of Adventure, Sailing, and Survival, received 5 Indie Awards, including the 2016 finalists in memoir at the Next Generation Indie Book Award. She lives in San Diego and enjoys sailing, hiking, her children, and her grand cat, Casper, and her grand dog, Alice. Before she started writing, she raised 2 children, ran a mechanical engineering business with her husband, took care of her aging mother, and dreamed of retirement when she could write full time. She says that she did everything late in life, including getting her degree in English literature from UCLA at the age of 31. How old, my goodness. Please help me with a warm life welcome for Ms. Leslie Johansen Nack. Leslie.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's nice to be here. I thank you for having me and I'm going to share my screen now. Is that what I'm going to do? I'm going to share my screen.
Yes.
Oh, hang on. Oh gosh, I'm sorry. I thought I had this. Okay, share screen. Got it. This one. Share.
There you go.
Okay.
Okay. We're seeing you. Yep, you're good. You're good.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so I just want to thank you for having me. I really appreciate the time to talk about my book. And I want to thank Megan Haynes, who recommended me to this group. She was very sweet to think of me and to contact Claude about my book. So I want to thank her for that. My book came out in May of 2022, and it's been enjoying some success. And it's my first historical fiction novel. I became inspired to write about, well, hang on, let me just play my book trailer for you. It'll give you an overview of the book, and then I'll talk more about the book itself. Here we go. Okay, so that's the book trailer. My husband actually made that for me, and I think it gives a good overview of the book and some of the characters who are in the book. I was inspired to write this book while I was still writing my first book because I was on tour at Hearst Castle. And if you've probably all been on tour there, and if you haven't, I really highly suggest a trip to San Simeon because it's the most amazing. So we were on a tour, we were showing some friends the castle, and the docent said, "Did you know that Marion Davies loaned William Randolph Hearst $1 million in 1937 and saved the Hearst Corporation from bankruptcy?" And my mouth fell open, and I was just completely shocked because no, I didn't know that, and I didn't really know much about her at all. She's sort of not prominently on display at Hearst Castle because she's the mistress, and he was married to Millicent Hearst. And so I was shocked not to know this, because that's a pretty amazing thing for a woman in 1937 to save one of the most powerful publishing tycoons in the world. I mean, in the United States for sure. Very rich man, and she had been with him for 20 years at this point. And so I was very interested. And when I came home from that trip from Hearst Castle, I looked up Marion Davies and I found some things about her, but I didn't find anything recent, no recent books, not much about her family. What I did find were many biographies about Hearst. But I became inspired to write about her because I kind of related to her being dismissed. She's been dismissed really from Hollywood, and Citizen Kane has a lot to do with that, and I'll talk about that later. But she, you know, so anyway, I became inspired to write about her, and I had to put it aside because I was still writing my first book. So I ordered some books for her and I set it aside. And later, after my first book came out, I went back to my research and to see if it was my passion and my inspiration was still there for her, to tell her story, since nobody seemed to know the behind the scenes story of her family, her life, what she went through. I mean, we all know about Hearst. Hearst, you know, is famous. He has many books about him, but there's really none about Marion. And so, and the inspiration was there. And so I started writing and I started traveling more. And I ordered all these books. The books that helped me the most were the only biography that's ever been written on Marion Davies, by Fred Lawrence Giles. It was published in 1972. And I used that book, was like a Bible to me. And I used The Chief by David Nassau, and I contacted David Nassau. He's a professor. And I asked him, I told him I was writing this book about Marion Davies, and he offered all of his research to me. And so he said his research was being housed at the Hearst Corporation, and that the archivist in San Francisco would get me a copy. And sure enough, I contacted the archivist and he sent me all of David Nassau's research, which was really generous and kind of him. I also used Marion Davies' book here. You'll see at the top the times we had, which is basically, she recorded her thoughts and her memories about living with Hearst while Hearst was still living, near the end of his life, when she was drinking a lot. So she starts drinking young, and as she progresses through her life, she starts drinking more and more and more until the end, when she's drinking a lot. And so she's recording these memories probably in 1949 or 1950 on a tape, with the thought of getting having an autobiography. But she ends up not finishing it, and they end up finding these tapes after she passes away, 10 years after Hearst. And then the publisher Ballantine went through and they published this book as her autobiography from her memories. But there's a lot of misremembering in this book, and it's asterisked a lot. She forgot and she misremembered a lot of different details for whatever reason. So it's fascinating to read it, but I'm not sure how accurate it is, because she's corrected on almost every page by the publisher for the actual facts that happened. So it was interesting to read, though. But it reads like someone recorded it. It's not written like a book. And then the other book that I used was The Silent Films of Marion Davies by Edward LaRusso. That book just came out in 2017, and it was fascinating because he is a silent film star buff, and he is trying to get all of her films restored and released. And I'll have a slide later on with all the movies that I have of hers that are released on DVD, the silent films. So anyway, this is, I just included this as the bibliography of all the books that were in that picture there that I used. I didn't read all of them from cover to cover, but I read everything related to Marion Davies. A lot of, I got bumped out, I guess. A lot of, can you see me?
We can see you. Just share your screen again.
Oh, okay. Oh gosh, hold on. I'm sorry, I don't know what happened here. Share my screen again. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Okay, here we
No,
go.
it's okay. It's okay.
Share. Something bumped me out. I don't know what it was. Play
Yeah.
from the current slide.
Happens all the time.
Okay, I don't know what bumped me out. Okay, so this is a
Not to
list,
worry.
like a bibliography of the books that were in that previous picture. And a lot of the people who were making movies with her and working with her during the time each wrote their own autobiography, and they have memories of Marion in their own autobiography. So it's their own autobiography, and they're remembering things, stuff that happened with Marion Davies. And so that was really useful. The other really useful book was Lita Gray Chaplin's book. She wrote a memoir about being married to Charlie Chaplin. Of course, that's a whole thing. She was 16 when he got her pregnant, and then he married her, and this whole thing happened. And so she becomes friends with Marion, and that whole theme is in the book, in my book, because it's quite shocking, actually. Anyway, this is a picture of me going to Hearst Castle and taking all the tours. And it was fascinating to talk to the docents and sort of pick their brain too after reading this book, and sort of just be where she was, be where she lived. And I went on all the tours. And then there's another tour that you can do that's a private tour. And so it's like $150, and they take 6 people and they'll take you anywhere you want to go. You can just say where you want to go. And the day that I did it with my girlfriend, Debbie, was the day nobody else booked. So it was just Debbie and I on a private tour, and we got to go anywhere we wanted. And it was fascinating. It was wonderful. And one of the places I really wanted to go was to Marion Davies' bedroom. And so we went up to her bedroom, and in the way it's set up on the 3rd floor of Hearst Castle, if you haven't been there, is Hearst's room is on one side, then there's a living room in the middle, and then Marion's suite is on the other side. And they each have, you know, their own bathrooms, their own closets, dressing areas, and bedrooms. And so we went into Marion's, of course, this is Hearst Castle, and you guys all know that, Neptune Pool, and very famous. So this is the chair in Marion's bedroom, and I asked the docent if it was original to Marion Davies, and she said yes. And then the phone rang, and she left the room for a minute while my friend Debbie and I were there, and I deigned to sit in the chair Marion Davies had sat in. But when I sat in it, I fell right to the ground. There's no springs in the chair, and I was just mortified to have ruined something, but I didn't ruin it. As you can see, I took this picture after this happened, and Debbie helped me get up out of the chair. And it's just sort of a funny story. And then we went into her bathroom, and you know, Marion would hide. Hearst was a teetotaler. He didn't drink very often. Marion would hide bottles of liquor all over the castle in different bathrooms in the toilet tank, because it would keep it cold. And so in her bathroom, I went and looked in her bathroom and in the tank in there, and she has a pink toilet. And anyway, it was fascinating to me. I don't know if anyone thinks this is interesting or not, but it was interesting to me because I was writing about her, and to just be where she was in her, she had a cedar closet, a nice vanity dressing area, as you can imagine. Everything was just amazing and wonderful. So it was fun. It was fun to get the private tour and to go behind the scenes from the regular tours once you've taken all the tours. So, but I guess you have to be really kind of a freak to do that. So anyway, I had fun. Okay, so some of the themes in my book, there's quite a few themes that I tried to pull through because I couldn't write Marion's whole entire life. You can't, you know, account for every moment. You have to pick and choose. You have to decide what you're going to focus on. And what I've decided to focus on was what we didn't really know. The public didn't know about her life, really. And so I focused on her family and getting to know her sisters and her brother and her parents. And the fact that when Hearst starts courting her in the theater when she's 17, she and then becomes his mistress, and he sort of hides her away a little bit. They can't go anywhere public because New York in the late teens is, the classes are very separated, and the upper class don't really, socialize with the lower class, except in the theater. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a little while. And then her career. I talked a little bit about the thread of her career and the movies that she made and how Hearst really shaped her filmography. And he started Cosmopolitan Pictures to make her a movie star. And he promoted her in all of his newspapers. He was just over the top in love with her, and really had decided that she was the woman he should have always married instead of his wife, who refused to give him a divorce. And they had 5 kids. They had 5 sons. So it wasn't nothing. I mean, it was kind of a scandalous thing for it to happen in the 1920s, for this to happen. But he was a powerful man, and he made things happen. So anyway, the Douris family, when I got to know the Douris family, which is what their legal name is, and they changed it to Davies later because Douris is an Irish name, and the Irish were very discriminated against in the early 1900s, and they wanted to have success in the theater. So there's 5 children, one of which, the son, ends up dying tragically at 11 years old. He drowns in a swamp behind his grandparents' house in Florida. And that sort of just changes the dynamic of the whole family, because Papa Ben is very distraught about it and lost his only son, and he starts drinking and he starts womanizing. And Mama Rose, she was left with the task of raising 4 daughters in a time where the world really favored men, and there weren't many options for women. And so Mama Rose got them close to the theater district, and they all had dance lessons. And her idea was to get them on the stage on Broadway, and for them to meet an older rich man and marry him. That was her plan for her daughters, for them to have a better life. And so she preached that to them, and they all tried to follow what she wanted. And so the first one to do that was Rainey, who's the oldest one. She married an older man, 22 years older than her, and had 2 children, and had a fair amount of success on the stage. Ethel, the next daughter, she became more of a dance hall dancer. She wasn't really popular in Broadway, and she was more of a homebody. She had one tragic love affair where the man passed away of a heart attack, and she just never really connected again, and was really kind of distraught about romance and relationships. So she was a big help to Marion and the other sisters. And then Rose, of course, is just a few years older than Marion, and there was a lot of competition between Rose and Marion. Marion and Rose both stuttered. Marion and Rose both took dance classes together. But Rose sort of, as she grew, Rose became more, didn't turn out to be as beautiful as Marion. Marion had more looks than Rose, and there became this competition between the 2 of them. And Marion was getting, when they started on the stage, when Marion was 17, Rose had a more difficult time moving up in the chorus lines, singing and dancing lines, than Marion did. She was discovered, very early on, and very beautiful as she began to bloom into womanhood. And so that's when Hearst sees her, because Hearst goes to the theater all the time. He has a seat in the front row. He has 2 seats, one for his hat and one for himself, and he's at almost every show. And when he sees Marion, he's just smitten from then on. And of course, she's young and unsure, and he begins to send her gifts. He sends her you know, flowers and perfume and lotions and jewelry. And he even sends her a Tiffany watch, and she gets flowers after every performance. But she hasn't talked to him for the longest time. He just sends gifts to her. So she's sort of very enamored with who Hearst is, and discovers him to be such, you know, a powerful publishing tycoon. Marion and Papa Ben had a close and close relationship. When Mama Rose moved the girls to Gramercy Park to be closer to Broadway, she left Papa Ben in Brooklyn, which is where they're from. And he just was a lawyer and made money and sent money to Mama Rose and the girls for rent and all of that. And Marion and Rose live with him during the week and attend school when they're young. So anyway, as Marion and Hearst began to formalize their relationship, at least privately, Marion wants to be the wife more than anything in the world. And she keeps bugging Hearst about getting a divorce, but Millicent will not submit to a divorce, because in that time, a woman of high society, high breeding, or let me just say that also that Millicent was also a dancer on the stage when Hearst met her and married her. So she was a dancer, and from the middle class or the lower middle class. So she wasn't necessarily from, you know, the upper high class society, but she was now, because she was married to Hearst, and she did not want to lose her standing. And she would have, because being divorced is like a black stain in this time. You know, you are ousted from decent society if you're a divorced woman. So of course she won't grant Hearst the divorce, and so he is trying to work it one way or another, and wants to be with Marion, but still wants to be a father to his 5 sons. And so there's some tension and friction, and I go into that in the book, the push-pull between Marion and Millicent, and him doing the right thing as a father, and, you know, still wanting to be with Marion. So Marion really wants to take care of her family, and Hearst, hang on, let's see if I got, let me see if I got another slide here. Okay, so Marion really wants to be Hearst's wife, and so they can't really live openly in New York at all, because it's very conservative and very strict about social norms at that time. And what was less strict was California and this new burgeoning industry of movie making. So Hearst begins Cosmopolitan Pictures in New York, and Marion makes several movies, and she does really well, and he likes her in these dramas, in these costume spectaculars, as very regal parts. He doesn't want her to be shown in a comedic role. He doesn't want her to be anything but high, you know, high drama, and from literature. So eventually they end up moving to California. And before they do, though, I have to explain that Marion got pregnant when she was 21, and they were really in a conundrum about what to do with that. So Hearst and Marion decide, well, Marion really decides that she's going to have the baby and have her sister Rose raise the baby as her own, and that Marion will be the aunt. And so Marion and Rose go off to France, and they have the baby, and they come back, and the baby is Rose's when they return. And this creates a whole storyline in my book that you can follow. I'm not going to go into all the details. I can answer questions if you have it, but it's a complicated thing, but everyone keeps the secret, is what I'm saying. The only time the secret was given was when Patricia, the daughter, on her deathbed admitted that she was the daughter of Marion Davies and William Randolph Hearst. And the LA Times ran an article, and the best information I have is that Patricia Lake was Marion Davies and William Randolph Hearst's daughter. And she knew about it for years, but nobody ever said anything publicly. But there were many suspicions and many articles and many people trying to gossip their way through this and figure it out. So this is her. She got married at Hearst Castle when she was 18 to Arthur Lake, who played Dagwood Bumstead in the series. And he was a bit of a comedic actor and really hit it off with Hearst. And they got married in 1937 at the castle, and Hearst and Marion gave her away. And there are several pictures from then. So as far as Marion's career, it started in New York and it moved to LA. And when it moved to LA, she became an MGM player as Cosmopolitan and MGM with Louis B. Mayer. They went into business together, and the deal was that Marion would be paid and Hearst would do all the publicity for the movies that came out for MGM, since he had all these dozens of newspapers across the country. And so Marion got the pick of a lot of different movies and made some. I want to read to you now. I don't know how I'm doing on time. I'm really not. How am I doing? Okay. So
You're good. You've got until 2 o'clock. Okay. So if you leave about 10 minutes for questions, that would be great. You're doing good.
Okay, great. So I'm gonna, so these are some of the movies that Marion made that are out right now in DVD, and they're also available. They show them on TNT once in a while. Most of them are the silent movies and that are being restored from the Library of Congress. And so the movie that really changed Marion's life was Citizen Kane. I'm going to read this about Charlie Chaplin. This is a scene in my book. I was filming a nerve-wracking scene with a full-maned lion whose cage I had to enter for a pretend kiss. In actuality, I would be kissing a glass partition, and movie magic would later remove the glass. The lion was supposed to roar his love for me, and then the scene would end. George Hill, the director, said it would be easy and that the lion didn't have any teeth. My knees trembled and I squeezed my hands together. Do I really have to go in, George? The script calls for the scene, Marion. The glass partition between you and the lion will protect you. Action, George yelled. And without another word, I marched into the cage. But before I could get to the center, the lion let out a terrible roar, shook his mane, and showed his great pointy teeth. I turned and ran out yelling, "Help!" And I hid behind George's chair, and everyone laughed. You said the lion didn't have any teeth. Whoops, I guess we picked the wrong lion, George said, turning away from me with a smirk on his face. Minor practical jokes were standard fare on the set. My reputation as a practical joker was known, but this felt more devious than normal. Very funny, George. Even behind the glass, he's pretty scary. I wanted to be the willing actress on the set and laugh it off, but I was terrified. I'm sorry, George yelled after me. Maybe we went too far. And heading to my dressing room to have a few minutes to myself, I saw Charlie Chaplin talking to George. I instantly adored him again, with his penetrating ocean blue eyes and boyish qualities. George yelled to me across the soundstage, "Change out of your dress, Marion, and give it to the costume director." Why? I asked. Charlie's going to do the scene for you, he said. Studying Charlie for a moment, I shook my head and smiled. He acknowledged me by raising his eyebrows twice. I handed over the dress, and a few minutes later, Charlie emerged wearing it and a blonde wig. Truly, he was a gorgeous girl, the same height as me at 5'5". I sat by the makeup man enthralled, nervous, and scared for him all at the same time. They filmed him from behind and walked into the cage. As he walked into the cage, the lion stood on his perch and Charlie entered the cage. Nothing happened. Charlie leaned forward and kissed the glass partition. The lion then roared, showing his big ugly teeth, and I flinched, leaning backward on my chair. Charlie was as still as could be, and then he turned around and left the cage with nerves of steel. Cut, Good job, Charlie. Can you do it one more time? George asked. I flew out of my seat. Don't make him do it again. Once is enough. Charlie smiled at me. Don't worry. George yelled action, and Charlie did the whole scene again. When it was all over, Charlie left the set without a word to me. He was flanked by a man I would come to know as Kono Toriachi, his valet and personal secretary. I yelled, "Thank you, Mr. Chaplin." He didn't turn around, but held up his hand as if to wave goodbye, and he skipped a little with his feet, like he always did in the movies. He was indeed the tramp. When I got off work later that day, Charlie was waiting for me outside the studio door. His face lit up as he watched me walk toward his silver Rolls Royce. I tried to hide my happiness, but a smile snuck out. I had spent the afternoon thinking about him and was pleased to see him. He leaned over and pushed the door open. Want a ride home? Sure, I said, knowing my life was about to change. The electricity I felt at the garden party years ago crackled to life around me. I could hear Eileen's voice in my head from the first time I had met Charlie. Watch out, she warned. WR was in San Simeon hosting Millicent and the boys and wouldn't be back for weeks. The ongoing push-pull for WR's time continued. I was alternately in love and angry with him, depending on how much time he spent with me. At least now I had Hollywood to distract me, or better yet, Charlie. Hop in, let's go, he said. And we sped away, leaving WR's spies and the Universal lot in our dust. The top was down on his convertible and my hair blew in the breeze. Charlie took my hand and brought it to his mouth and kissed my open palm, all without taking his eyes off the road. Do you have time to go to the beach? My hand was about to start shaking from excitement, so I pulled it away. I tried to act normal, like driving to the beach with the famous Charlie Chaplin was perfectly normal. Do you do that to all the girls? Only the pretty ones, he said. And he asked again, well, do you have time for the beach, you little blue butterfly? Where did you hear that name? Some article about you, and it came to mind immediately when you got in the car, which means it was an accurate description. He had a sly grin on his face, and after a pause said, well? I said, yes, sure, I'll go. Let's go to the beach. So that's how Marion and Charlie start their friendship. And he really sponsors her in her comedy. She loves to be the comedic actress. And eventually they start doing these shows at Hearst Castle and her ocean house when famous guests would come. And they would do this slapstick kind of scenes where they would trip over furniture and help each other up and just make everyone laugh. And it was hilarious. And Hearst loved it. He loved it. He did suspect that they were having an affair, but he never had proof of it. His real mistress at that point when they were living in California was building the castle. That was his passion. It was his love. He was up there all the time with Julia Morgan and, you know, working on erecting the castle, tearing parts down, rebuilding it. He was quite the perfectionist. Okay, so hold on. So here's a picture. So Hearst in 1928 had this mansion built for Marion as her home. It was called Ocean House, and it was enormous. You know, there were, I don't know, 55 bathrooms and 160, you know, I don't know. I don't have all the details. They're in my book. I don't have them committed to memory. I can look them up. But the circle around the building to the left here is the circle around Marion Davies' guest house, which is still standing today. So Ocean House didn't make it. It was sold. They sold it in 1947, and it became a hotel for a while, and then it was torn down. The Marion Davies guest house is still standing, and you can go there and take tours, and the docents will give you a tour of the guest house where she allowed, you know, Cary Grant and Clark Gable to live for a summer when they wanted to be down at the beach. This was known as, you know, gold. Oh, I'm drawing a blank. This was all the famous movie stars and Louis B. Mayer and all the Hollywood types were living along this stretch of Coast Highway in Santa Monica, the Gold Coast. I guess it's called the Gold Coast. So you can go there. It's really fascinating. They do a birthday party for Marion Davies every single year in January because her birthday is on January 3rd. And it's fun to attend. Everyone comes in costume. They even hire an actress to be Marion Davies, and she kind of flits around the audience, and it's fun to see her dance. And anyway, Ocean House was sold and then eventually demolished. But one of the rooms in Ocean House, Hearst, was eccentric, as you know. He was extravagant, and money was no object to him. And one of the houses in Ocean House was a tavern that he brought over from Surrey, England. So the tavern went out of business, and Hearst bought the whole entire building and had it taken apart piece by piece, put on a ship, and brought over here and reinstalled in Marion's house, so that when you opened the door, it was like you were walking into an English pub. And it was amazing. It's just completely wood paneled, everything, the booths, the bar, everything. And so that room was put in storage before the building was demolished. And it was in storage for a while until a guy in San Diego bought it and opened up the Red Fox Inn, which is the name of the tavern in England. It was called the Red Fox Inn. So he opened it up, and it's been through a few iterations, but it's still vibrant and alive. It just reopened after the pandemic in March or April of this year. It was in the San Diego Union Tribune. There's an article online. I went there for dinner with a friend of mine, and it was really enjoyable and interesting to know that this was in her Ocean House. And it's a great evening, and the food is wonderful. So if you're looking for something fun to do and some local history with Marion Davies, you know, it's in North Park. It's across the street from the Lafayette Hotel. It used to be right next door in the Lafayette Hotel, but they moved it across the street. So anyway, that's my recommendation for you for local Marion Davies history. So some of the things I did when I was writing the book was I went and visited her mausoleum, which is where she's buried, and all of her sisters and mother and father are all buried there too. I brought her flowers, and it's a funny thing writing someone else's story when you've never met the person. And so in some ways I just wanted to really honor the fact that she was, a real person, and I'm doing the best I can to tell her story. I really am. It is written as a novel with dialogue, as you could tell. So that's why it's a novel and it's not a biography. But I feel like I did Marion proud. I feel like I did. I'm proud of the job I did. Anyway, and then I visited her at the Grauman's Chinese Theater. They have Marion signed her name and put her handprints and her footprints in the ground in 1929 there. And then, of course, it wouldn't be complete unless I visited her star on Hollywood Boulevard, which was a lot of fun. So the movie Citizen Kane, let me go back here. The movie Citizen Kane came out in 1941, and it pretty much depicted Marion as a drunk, talentless bore. And Orson Welles years later took that back because Marion was Hearst's mistress. I think it was easy to dismiss her and all the work that she did. She made 44 films. She could have just sat home and had people bring her iced tea or whiskey or whatever. But instead she worked, and she worked hard, and she is not really given credit for that. Movies are not, the movies today, you can't compare a movie at the beginning of the movie industry to movies today. So if your expectation is you're going to see a fantastic movie that is of today's caliber, it's not going to happen. But it was the beginning of the movie industry, and it's fascinating to see how they shot movies back then. And So anyway, she worked hard. She didn't just sit around. And I think that she deserves a little bit of credit for that. And although she did have a drinking problem, I don't think that's any of Orson Welles' business to be discussing that in public. Why shame her? I mean, he was looking to shame Hearst because for some reason he had it out for Hearst. He denies that the movie's even about Hearst and Davies, but it's ridiculous. He writes in that autobiography I showed you that Marion, she recorded the tapes and they transcribed the tapes. At the beginning of that book, Orson Welles writes the foreword, and I also include it in my book because he takes back all the damage he did, because she was pretty much dismissed and laughed at after that movie. And it was tragic. It was, nobody deserves that. She worked hard her life. So anyway, so this is a picture of Marion at Hearst Castle here. And this is why I picked the cover of this book. You can tell it has the same fencing. What is that called? Around the edge there. And I'm really proud of my cover. I really love my cover. It's gotten great reviews so far. So anyway, I don't know if I had anything else to tell you. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. I do better with question and answer. I have a lot of information. It's just hard to remember all of it to bring it out at one time. So I'm happy to answer anything. So that's, I have a website if you want to, there's links to buy the book on the website. Reviews are how authors earn their stripes in the world. I am starting late in life as a late writer, but thank you for listening. I appreciate your time. I do. I hope if you read the book, I hope you enjoy it. It's a passion project for me.